her now.
And where are they?
They moved to York County, South Carolina. I think the little town she's closest to is Kuykendall. It's kind of out in the boonies a little bit, but it's a lovely area. She likes the country.
Good morning, good morning.
What about you? Are you staying at the house? Oh, good, yeah.
Till Christmas.
Yeah. I was talking with my Johnston nephew Jim, who lives in Statesville, but he has a son Bill, and Alice is his husband, recently married his son, and they live in Black Mountain. Yeah, they lost power for 2 weeks, I think he says, but their house was not. They lost in a tree, but their house was not damaged. Thank goodness. I don't know where it is, but Jim said it was high up, so that saved him from the water. You know, Carol's son, Gary, Carol Marley, has moved back to Black. Yeah. So she'll probably go up there also. She does. She's still driving. Yeah. She had surgery. She lost it. She had back surgery. Since then, it's been much better.
Lewis,
Brought you something today, brother.
what you got? Oh, the thing you told me about.
Right
Great,
here.
okay.
Egypt's Island mini God.
Great. You want this back?
I can see okay. It's a little dark. Hello, how are you? Yeah. What you up to these days, Elaine? Yeah, Christmas is such a busy time, isn't it?
It is, yes.
And then come Thursday of next week, it'll be so quiet at the bottom. Yeah, I might spend the day in bed.
I've already got people stuff for the next week.
Yeah.
My family will be here, so they'll be here till the first.
Do I hear from her?
Alan.
Oh, no. No,
Gilmore.
you? I heard he was sick. I don't know what
Gene, I'm gonna make these announcements first.
Okay.
Then we,
I noticed, I think he's got 4 verses of Oklahoma.
yeah.
Is that what's in the...
That's that, but you know, we were gonna do, have we got one verse of, in Latin?
Yeah, yes.
Is that first or
I
Latin?
guess that's what the 4th verse is.
Well, there's 4 verses in this book too.
There's 4 in that book.
Yeah.
So, and that's in Kelly's.
Do we have that first or last? I'll have to turn around and look. I can do that. John, is Latin first or last? First, all right, very good. Here comes the Latin person right now. Yeah, Bill Strong will sing a solo on the first verse of the first hymn. Pam, shall I go ahead? You want me to go ahead?
Yeah, yes, please.
All right, good. Good morning, everybody. Oh, thank you for saying that. That was a hearty good morning. Before we start, we've got two announcements. Number one, there is no Sunday school next week. Number two, on Sunday, January 5th, we will welcome Bishop Will Williman as our all-adult Sunday school teacher here, 945 in the Congregation House. Will is Professor of Practice of Christian Ministry, Director of the Doctor of Ministry program at Duke Divinity School, former Dean of the Chapel at Duke, and many people consider him, I do, one of the best known and most influential preachers in the United States. He's a retired bishop of the North Alabama Conference of the United Methodist Church, for which he will have stars in his crown. So no Sunday school next week. Will Williman on the first Sunday in this building, all Sunday school classes together. Now, today what we're going to do is we're going to go through the most popular hymns that you all chose last week. Those of you who chose, those who didn't, sorry we didn't get you on the list, but we've got 9 very, very familiar Christmas hymns from various times and various places that we're going to go through together. Did y'all get a handout?
I didn't bring one this week. I forgot.
Okay, that's all right. Well, let me just tell you what we're going to do then. I have a handout. We're going to start off with an invitation to worship. And the hymn there is, "O Come All Ye Faithful," Latin and English. The second one has to do with the location of the birth of Jesus. We've got 2 hymns there. One is "Once in Royal David City." The other one is "O Little Town of Bethlehem." Then we go to the shepherds, and we have the first Noel, and then we have "Hark the Herald Angels Sing." Then we go to the manger itself with "Silent Night," "Away in a Manger," and "What Child Is This?" And finally, the world celebrates, and we'll do "Joy to the World," and we'll join with the choir of King's College, Cambridge, in singing the Hallelujah Chorus, if you wish to. So that's a pretty full time. And now I want to give you all who, some of you didn't sign up, so you got no voice this morning, I guess. But those of you who chose these hymns, if you want to take a minute, and I meant to bring the egg timer and I forgot it, but if you want to take 1 minute and say why it is that this is important to you, you're certainly welcome to do so. So we'll go through these. I'll give a very brief commentary on each one of them, and then we'll sing. And if we get down toward the end and it looks like we're running out of time, we may have to truncate some of the verses on the latter ones. But we're going to begin today with one which is everyone's favorite, but only the favorite of one plus one people in here. One wanted it in Latin and one wanted it in English, so we're going to accommodate both. Bill will sing the solo on the first verse, and then we'll all join in later. "O Come All Ye Faithful" was written in Latin by an Englishman who was a musician and a calligrapher. He was an Englishman, but he spent most of his adult life in France, and he was doing calligraphy for the Roman Catholic Church. He wrote this hymn, and it was later translated into English, but he wrote it in Latin because it was useful for chapel services among Roman Catholics where he was living in France. So people used to say this is a very, very old hymn. That's not so. It's kind of middle of the 18th century, and it's been very popular in English for a long time. So first of all, "O Come All Ye Faithful," Adeste Fidelis. do it. Yeah. Thank you. This next hymn that we have is a favorite of 1.5 people. The half is Jane. She wanted 2, so we give her this one and one other. But this is a song that if you tune in to WDAV on this coming Christmas Eve, that's Tuesday at 10 a.m., you will hear this hymn sung at King's College, Cambridge, in their Lessons and Carol service. There's a story about it I want to tell you because it may be true, but the story goes that they line up, and this is, you'll see in the final thing we do today, we've got the King's College Choir doing Hallelujah Chorus, and you'll see it's all male, but it's males from about age 6 to about age 70. And when they line up to process at the beginning of the Lessons and Carol service, they're going to sing this hymn. They line up, and the story goes that the choir master stands there, and here are all these little boys, you know, ages 8, 9, 10 years old, and the choir master all of a sudden points to one of them, and that one voice starts off with, "Once in David's royal city." That one little voice. And then it grows and it grows, and of course by the end of it, they got the organ going, all the choir singing, all the people singing. It's just glorious. But what a way to begin a Christmas Eve service. They do it every year this way. So, Once in David's royal David city. This hymn was written for little children, middle of the 19th century, and the author was the Bishop of Derry in Ireland eventually. The music was written by a lawyer, believe it or not, who turned into an organist, and Mendelssohn thought he was such a fine organist that he had this guy come and play for the first performance of Elijah. So he wound up writing about 1,000 hymn tunes, but Once in Royal David City is far and away his best known hymn tune. So, Once in Royal David City. see why that is designated a child's hymn, a very beautiful one. Here comes another one. But here comes one from a different background altogether. There was a man who was referred to in this country as the Prince of Preachers. In the latter part of the 19th century, his name was Phillips Brooks. He was an Episcopalian, believe that, an Episcopalian, Prince of Preachers. It works anyway. But he preached in Philadelphia and Boston. Eventually he was the Bishop of Boston of the Episcopal Church. In 1865, on Christmas Eve, he rode a horse from Jerusalem down to Bethlehem, and en route, he passed through what was known as the Plain of the Shepherds, and went into Jerusalem, worshiped there on Christmas Eve night at the Church of the Nativity. He returned home, and he wrote this poem as he was returning home. He asked the choirmaster in his church to write a melody to go with this town, with his song, and the choirmaster couldn't get it done. And then during Saturday night before the Sunday service, it all came to him at once. And eventually a statue was made of Phillips Brooks, who, by the way, was 6'6" tall. And this choirmaster standing behind him, Augustus St. Gaudens, the famous 19th century sculptor, sculpted this statue of them, and he was there with the little children starting this song, "O Little Town of Bethlehem." Now, by the way, there's always been several tunes to this, but we're going to do the one which is, I think, the original one, "O Little Town of Bethlehem." This next one is, we're with the shepherds, hearing the news, and the first song we're going to sing, which was the favorite of some of you, Originally, it had 9 stanzas to it. You may be relieved to know we're going to only sing 3 of them. If you don't like this, it's the first Noel. And one of the interesting things about this song, you may notice it in our hymnals, Noel is spelled Nowell. The reason for that is that's the English rather than the French, and it was first published in England toward the beginning of the 19th century. It's a much older song, but we don't know exactly where it came from. It's kind of a folk inheritance that we have. So first Noel, verses 1, 2, and 4. This next hymn, also having to do with the shepherds hearing the news, is written by our friend we heard a couple of weeks ago, Charles Wesley, younger brother of John, 18th child of their parents. He was the one who wrote over 6,000 hymns. Some people say 6,500 hymns. This is one of the better known, but not better known by its original title. Its original title was Hark How All the Welkin Rings. Doesn't have much of a snap to it, does it? So we go to Hark the Herald Angels Sing. The tune to this is an adaptation of a tune by Felix Mendelssohn, who was one of the greats, obviously, of the 18th, 19th century. And he was grandson of Moses Mendelssohn, who was a great Jewish philosopher. Turns out Felix himself was a Lutheran. And he wrote a number of church music things. This is one of the more popular ones. Once again, here we have a hymn that has 10 verses, 10 stanzas in the original. We will not sing all 10 stanzas. next one we have has one of the most famous stories about it of all the Christmas hymns that we have, and it's the one that has to do with the broken organ in the little church in a town just outside of Salzburg. The person who was in charge of the service for Christmas Eve night, the associate pastor there, was a man named Joseph Moore, a Roman Catholic priest. And at the last minute, he had written this poem, and he asked his friend Franz Gruber, who was the choir master and organist, though the organ was broken, to write a tune for this song. And apparently, Gruber accompanied this tune that first Christmas Eve night. It was sung on the guitar. The tune was just their own little local tune for a while, and then the traveling repairman, I think the organ repairman, found the hymn. He took it with him, showed it to a glove maker who showed it to a family like the Trapp family, albeit in the 19th century, who sang it at the Leipzig Fair, and thereafter it was a staple for German Christmas carols ever since. The Germans brought it to America. It was printed in the middle of the 19th century in the Methodist hymnal in America, and it, by the way, is the most favorite of the group here assembled. 5.5 votes. You can guess who the other vote was. So, Silent Night. The next hymn we're going to sing, by the way, we're going to sing it to two different tunes. I've asked Gene to play one tune for the first verse and then 2 and 3 for the second verses. This has been traditionally referred to as Luther's cradle song, and for a long time it was assumed that Martin Luther had written this. Now, he did write other hymns, and he wrote one Christmas hymn that's in our hymn book, but he did not apparently write this because it was not known to the Germans until 1934. So Luther didn't get around to it by then. It may have been written originally in America for the 200th anniversary of either Luther's birth or perhaps it was written for the anniversary of the beginning of the Reformation. It turned out unknown until where it had come from, 1934, and it was discovered that it was actually written by an American who got a businessman who was very much involved in camp meetings to write the first version of this, the Cradle Song, and then later on a man who was an editor of music, Mueller, wrote the second and third, wrote the other version of this. So we have two in the hymnal. We're going to sing number one. Jean will play that through, and then we'll take a little interlude there, and then she'll play that, and then we'll do numbers 2 and 3. The next one we have is a hymn that was written, believe this or not, by the president of an insurance company. Let that sink in for a minute. And he was a person who specialized as a kind of an avocation in translating Greek hymns into English, but he wrote this himself. And then he discovered the traditional hymn that goes all the way back to Tudor England, Greensleeves, with which we're very familiar in various contexts, of course. It was a popular tune in the 16th century. Shakespeare had two of his characters mention Greensleeves. Falstaff in Merry Wives of Windsor said, "Let the sky rain potatoes, let it thunder to the tune of Greensleeves." But the 17th century adaptation of the hymn was originally done by Isaac Watts, but then the insurance agent later on took it up as we know, "What Child Is This?" introduction I had designed for you all today after um, being invited to worship and going to Bethlehem and seeing the shepherds and going to the manger is the whole world celebrating the birth of the Christ child. The hymn that we're going to sing together, you can try to sing the last thing if you want to, but the hymn we're going to sing together is one that was done by Isaac Watts. Isaac Watts has been known as the father of hymnody in England. He was not an Anglican. He was a nonconformist, little bitty guy, less than 5 feet tall, semi-invalid for most of his life. He was invited by one of his parishioners to come spend a week at his country house in order to recover his health. He went and stayed for 36 years. And while he was there, he wrote 52 books on various subjects and 600 hymns. Now, his style of writing hymns was quite different from what had come along before, because it was his style to adapt things from the Old Testament as though they were Christian. And so when you sing Joy to the World, you're actually singing Psalm 98, which originally didn't have anything to do with Jesus. It had more to do with the liberation from captivity in Babylon. But Isaac Watts baptized it for us, and it's become one of the most famous hymns and most favorite hymns of all time. So let's sing Joy to the World together. Celebration is a very famous piece, known to us all, going to be sung in church by the whole congregation or those who will today at 11 o'clock, and you sang it if you were at 8:45 service. It's the Hallelujah Chorus. We had one person in our group who, rather than claim for a hymn, he shall remain nameless, but his first name is Bill, but he said he wanted the Hallelujah Chorus with brass. And so we're going to do the very best that we can. It's a custom which I think dates back to the first performance of the Messiah for the congregation to stand for the Hallelujah Chorus. Apparently the king stood, either he was stiff and wanted to stretch his bones, or he was so moved by the Hallelujah Chorus, but he stood, so of course all the rest of the audience had to stand up as well. I was in a group, in fact, my family, when I was a little boy, or maybe a teenager, we went to the the Passion Play in the Black Hills of South Dakota. Don't ask me why, but we did. And at the end of it, they played the Hallelujah Chorus, and my family, being a righteous family of Presbyterians, we stood up for the Hallelujah Chorus, and behind us somebody said, "Down in front." But if you will, Bill, we set to play this, aren't we, John? And this is King's College, Cambridge, and it made me cry when I watched it the other day. I hope it'll move you as well. Let's all stand for the Hallelujah Chorus. Wow. Wasn't that something? Listen, we got a few minutes. If anybody wants to talk about why it's their favorites or something, we can do that.
I just want to say one thing. We'll all remain standing in recognition and celebration and gratitude to you, John. This has been, and Jean, an experience of Christmas.
And John has already disappeared, but we owe it to John as well.
And always John. who's running off to do something else, non-stop. Anything that anyone wants to say or share? Yeah. You're going to sing a solo now.
No, in Latin.
How about Stila Knock?
There's a show, I think it's on PBS Tuesday, I think, about the Christmas truce, which started with Silent Night in the World War II or World War I in 1914, where the Germans sang and they stopped fighting for 16 hours or something like that. I just wanted to say thank you, last week especially, for replacing Mariah Carey as an earworm for Christmas.
Y'all sit down, please. I mean, you can go to church. Anybody want to tell why it's your favorite? The one that you chose?
I chose Joy to the World, and the ending part of that, Wonders of His Love, just speaks to me at this point.
That's wonderful. Anybody else who had a favorite want to tell why?
It's just a question. Greensleeves and What Child Is This is my favorite. I don't remember ever seeing the words about the cross in singing that before.
Yeah.
Is that just a verse I've missed, or is that one we don't always sing?
I think it's one we'd always sing. I think it was there originally, I believe.
My mother and her sisters, there were